Good evening, Fiji, and welcome to For the Record. Well, we continue this week when last week we premiered our new format of For the Record, and joining me once again on the panel is senior journalist at the FBC newsroom, Mr. Edwin Nand, and also from a Fiji Sun, the managing editor for training, Mr. Nyamani Ndelembatiki, who's also a seasoned journalist. And welcoming back on For the Record is the leader of the National Federation Party, Professor Biman Prasad. Welcome back.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Now, it's been a historic week for the National Federation Party. Early on Monday, the launch of the manifesto for 2014 elections, and also on Tuesday, a visit to Mbau Island. And this, the first time the National Federation Party has ventured onto the island, and quite remarkable so, because at the launch of the National Federation Party's manifesto, one of the three things that NFP is going to do, in its first three things you mentioned, is that it's going to convene a national forum for traditional Tokay chiefs and heads of Yabusa, in which to discuss the Fijian administration. It's interesting. How do you feel this will impact the visit? Is this all part of the party's take on garnering more support from the Tokay community for NFP?
Yeah. First of all, I think we have to understand that the 2013 constitution has been imposed on the people of Fiji. And obviously, there are sections within the constitution, such as the powers given to the Prime Minister, the Attorney General, the derogations in the Bill of Rights, and the dissatisfaction expressed by a significant number of chiefs and the indigenous community about the removal of GCC. And so our stand on this particular issue is that the NFP in government will seek a review of the constitution within the parliamentary process, which will include all these issues. And with respect to the Fijian administration, I think it is only proper that the next government and NFP in government in the first 6 months will convene a big meeting of the chiefs and heads of Yabusas, because we want to hear from them directly their concerns and how we would want to move ahead in any changes to the constitution, so that it is a collective decision and it is done through the parliamentary process. NFP has a history of doing that. We did that with respect to the changes made to the 1990 constitution. And indeed, in the 1997 constitution, the NFP accepted provisions in that constitution with respect to the Fijian administration. So our view is that is the best way forward to relook at some of those issues. But right now, this is a constitution that is there. We have accepted that. The best way to move towards democracy is to fight this election, and our focus right now is to win the election, get into parliament, get into government, and then take those issues from there.
Are you thinking of bringing back the Great Council of Chiefs?
We are not saying that at all. I've made this very clear to all the media organizations, to all the people in this country, because it is not a simple issue. It is a sensitive issue. It needs to be handled with care, even if people are dissatisfied with what's in the constitution. It is not a matter for me right now to jump the gun, like some other political parties have done that, because we need a very quiet, calculated, decent dialogue about how we can move forward. And this is not just about the changes to the constitution. It's not about the GCC. It's about other things in the constitution as well. And we don't want to change. We don't want to throw out constitutions as we have done in the past. And it is the military in this country which threw out the 1970 constitution,
Professor,
which threw out the 97 constitution.
If I may,
and
the issue is...
And that is why we want to change the constitution within the parliamentary
The
process.
issue is, the question was with regards to Fijian administration and the GCC.
Yeah.
If I may quote quickly from the manifesto itself,
Yeah.
this meeting that you propose to call of Itoke leaders is to determine for themselves the future of Fijian administration. What do you mean by Fijian administration?
Well, you see, when you talk about the Fijian administration, you're talking about the institutions emanating from the GCC. We used to have the Fijian Affairs Board, the governing of the Native Land Trust Board, now the Itoke Land Trust Board. So all these are Fijian administration matters. And it is not as simple as what some people would like to believe. And that is why our position is that we have a constitution that has been imposed onto the people of Fiji. The people of Fiji, the political parties have decided that the best way to move forward to bring back democracy is to fight the election under the constitution. And changing a constitution within a parliamentary process is not a big deal. I mean, constitutions have been changed in every country. But you don't change the constitution by throwing it out at the point of the gun.
To decide their own administration, isn't that what a government is supposed to do? A government is supposed to look after all its people equally?
Edwin, you have to understand that.
Can I just add something to that, Professor?
Like other traditional institutions, you can equate that to, say, Sanatana Dharma Pratinidhi Sabha. You can equate that to a Sangam organization. These are cultural, traditional organizations that have been part of the history of this country.
Do they hold power over their followers?
They have influence over many things, and what they do sometimes impact on the people of the country. But
they've never had as much power as the Great Council of Chiefs, which appointed presidents and vice presidents.
That's not the
and
matter.
Was an advisory body to the government.
Edwin, that's not a matter we're discussing here. We are discussing what is our position on the GCC, and I've made this very clear. Let's not get into the details.
Your manifesto says to decide the future of Fijian administration.
We believe that these are sensitive issues for our indigenous community. These are indigenous issues that many of them are aggrieved by, and the way in which this was thrown out of the constitutional process. And let me just remind all of you about one thing. The High Commission was appointed by this government. It came up with a constitution which had a different kind of provision for the GCC as opposed to what was in the 1997 constitution. And even parties at that time like the SDL accepted that change in the provision for the GCC. Now that was again thrown out by this government, and then a constitution was imposed. What we are merely saying is that the people of this country should not have to tolerate an imposition by few people who think what is good for the country. The people of this country must decide what is good for them, and this is why we are saying that our participation under this constitution to move Fiji forward to democracy and then look at the grievances within the parliamentary process to change the constitution. I don't see anything wrong with that. And we can go to town.
I'm sorry, gentlemen. We're going to have to cut to a very short break, but we'll be right back with our discussion here on For the Record. Welcome back to For the Record. We're having a discussion with the leader of the National Federation Party, and just before this, I'm going to hand over to Nemani. Nemani, you had a point just before we went to the break.
Yeah, sure. Professor, one of the core elements of the Constitution is equal citizenry. Your push to try and get the indigenous recognition back, how do you reconcile this? On one hand, you talk about equal citizenry, and you support it, I believe.
Yeah, of course we do.
So how do you reconcile that with your push to get indigenous recognition and getting back the BLV and all that? How do you reconcile these two? Because they are opposing views here, don't they?
First of all, Nemani, National Federation Party has never said that we want to bring GCC back. What we are saying is that the process through which the GCC was removed from the Constitution the 1997 constitution, and the constitution that this government came about through its own commission. And this is what we are talking about. Let me just also make this point. When you talk about equal citizenry, you have to define what it means. And when you talk about equal citizenry, you talk about equal opportunities for all our citizens in government, state institutions. Now this government and the Prime Minister himself and many others who talk about equal citizenry must explain other state institutions, for example, the composition of the military, for example, the composition of the civil service, for example, the composition of senior government appointees. Now, when you talk about equal citizenry, it means equal opportunities. It means equal treatment. It means the ability of governments to reflect the nature of the society. So, look, I think the people of this country have to understand that change to a constitution, change to fundamental issues that affect people, that are sensitive, that are cultural, that are traditional, must come from the people themselves.
So you have no problems bringing back the BLV and at the same time accepting this provision in the Constitution about equal citizenry?
I think you have to get this right. We have never said that we want to bring this back or that back. What we are saying is, here you have a constitution that has been imposed on the people of Fiji. The people of Fiji are participating in this election. The political parties are participating in this election because we all want to bring back democracy. And after the election, any change to the constitution must be taken through within the parliamentary process, as was the case when we changed the 1990 constitution. So there is no problem. What is the harm in a political party saying that when we get into government, we will seek a review of the constitution? And I have pointed out earlier all the issues that we want to seek a review, including the concerns of the indigenous community and chiefs who are aggrieved by the way in which some of the aspects of the Fijian administration was removed from the previous constitution.
Professor, one of the things that have come out quite clearly is that all the other political parties, apart from Fiji First, are now appealing or going for the Tauke votes.
You think Fiji First is not appealing to Tauke votes?
Well, okay. Let's say all the
everybody is appealing to votes from every community.
But what I'm saying is, traditionally the NFP, as its power base, has come from the Indo-Fijian community. Over the years, it seems to have lost that support. Do you feel right now that you would be able not only to gain that, but also regain the Fijian support, the Tauke support that was there previously, to recapture the old glory days when the SM Koyas, the KC Ramrakas, Irene Jane Orion, Ratu Moses, Ratu Soso Katunivere, and
Julian Tongnivalu,
Tongnivalu. The NFP now is just a shadow of the NFP in those days. Are you confident you can regain the old, the glory days?
Very good question, Nemani. This is a new look NFP. NFP, which, in my view, presents the future of this country, or represents the future of this country. If you look at our lineup, we have a very strong group of people from all different backgrounds, and especially if you look at our indigenous candidates in this election, you will have difficulty comparing them with other political parties. And what we are saying that this is a new look party. NFP has changed. It has changed forever. Let's not look at 40 years of history. History is good. There are things that happen in history. But what I'm looking as the leader of the party is a new look NFP with a new vision for Fiji. And in the last 2 or 3 months, we've had very good feeling very, very good support from right across different sections of our population, and including the indigenous community. Because I think what they see in NFP is NFP's enduring values of freedom, democracy, and human rights. But more than that, they are looking at what we are offering to the people of Fiji in this election. And I think that is what we want to pursue.
I want to ask a more pointed question.
Sure.
I'm not going to take you back 40 years.
Yeah.
I'm going to take you back to the last two elections.
Yeah.
The NFP failed to secure any seats. You have no leadership record in the last two elections and since.
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
Well, journalists love to ask this question. I've answered that question many times on FBC and on other stations. That is correct. NFP did not win a seat in 2006. We had won a seat in 2001. That was robbed.
Subsequently lost it through court.
Through court battle. But let me say this. If we had the proportional representation that we are going to have this time, NFP would have had a significant number of seats. In fact, in 1999, if we had the proportional representation, we would have. I'm coming to that. You know, give me some time.
You have no leadership record. What do you say to that?
I have no leadership record, but we are looking to the future. You, journalists, media organizations, should go and ask those who have been leaders before. What is their record? Those who are in government today, what did they promise in 2006 or 2007? What were they saying in 2007, 8, and 9? What are they saying now? Where are they now? So, let me tell you this. Even though I have not been a leader, not been a prime minister, I was never a member of parliament, but I've had enough experience of looking at politics, looking at the management of the economy, and I fought an election in 1999, so I know and understand what the people want. And let me also tell you that in the last 3 months, you know, while we were formulating our manifesto, I traveled around the country, I met all walks of people from all walks of life, and it is very, very important for me, someone who comes from a rice farming background, from a family of 13 brothers and sisters, someone who's seen poverty firsthand, someone who's seen the hardship in the rural areas, someone who's moved over the last so many years to a position of becoming a professor of economics. So for me, the vision for this country, the problem that I see in this country today has motivated, and I think I have the necessary skills, knowledge, experience to lead this political party. And indeed, I've been given so much confidence in the last three months that I feel very, very confident that I can lead this country.
Thank you very much. On that note, we'll go to another short break. We'll be right back here on For the Record. You're back on For the Record, and we continue our discussion this evening with the leader of the National Federation Party. Now, just before the break, now, Edwin, you wanted to make a point?
Yes, well, actually, this is something that stuck in my mind from when we began the show, but discussions carried forward. But I want to take you back now. With the issue of equal citizenry, you pointed out the military, the civil service, and senior arm of government. And your comment was, look at the military, look at the civil service, and look at the senior arm of the government. What do you mean? Are people in Fiji being marginalized, and who is being marginalized?
Well, the point that I was trying to make, you know, is when you talk about equal citizenry, equal opportunities, you know, people having the same rights, people having the same opportunities, you got to look at the institutions, the processes, the actual implementation and the realization of having a feeling of being equal to everybody else. So, you know, it's all right to talk about equal citizenry. It's all right to talk about everyone having a common name. I think you got to build a set of institutions, a set of processes, so that the people don't feel marginalized, people don't have the perception that the idea of equal citizenry is not applied to everyone. And I think it's very important for any government to understand that. And I think the only way in which that can be achieved is if we have a free and fair election, we move to democracy, and within the parliamentary process, these things could be discussed.
Why did you point to these three entities?
Because that has always been a concern by the people of Fiji, not just people of
what's the concern?
Concern about discrimination. I mean, Edwin, you know this very well. I mean, after the '87 coup, there was a policy of positive discrimination, and there's been accusations of what was happening during the Garcia days, and you know the current
isn't that exactly what's being changed right now?
No, but this is what I'm saying, that the reality on the ground doesn't change just by calling everybody a Fijian, just saying that, you know, we have equal citizenry in the constitution. That is the point I'm trying to make. And as I said before, I have no quarrels with that. I have no quarrels with that in the constitution. Let's not sidetrack.
As far as the military is concerned,
yeah.
Have you ever asked the military what their criteria is and how they select people to go into the military? Is it done on merit?
You have to ask the military, don't ask me. Yeah. These are questions that have been raised in the past. And I think it's the responsibility of people like yourselves and journalists to actually raise these very, very important questions about equal citizenry, about how things are implemented on the ground. So really, the point is that we have no quarrels with the idea of equality. In fact, NFP's history is based on equal citizenry. The concept of one person, one vote comes from the National Federation Party. It came from them before independence. We made our submission to the Constitutional Review Commission. So let's not get there. Yeah. I mean, we have a very...
I have a story to tell. I have a story to tell. One of my very good friends, very close friend of mine, Indo-Fijian. I can say that not because I'm bringing up a racial issue, but we all know what we were talking about with regards to enrollment into the military and such.
Yeah.
He's left for Golan Heights 2 days ago. Indo-Fijian, with the military, he's gone to serve on a peacekeeping mission.
What are you trying to say?
I'm saying, we were talking about marginalization.
We always had a very small number of Indo-Fijians in the military. So don't make that
why
a trivial point.
do you think that is so?
You brought up the military.
No, it's not a trivial point. I'm saying that when you talk about the idea of equal citizenry, there might be good reasons why Indo-Fijians are not in the military. But the fact is that the point I'm making, that just by having a provision in the Constitution of equal citizenry does not mean that, you know, people on the ground in government policies. I mean, 1990 Constitution and 1997 Constitution had a very good Bill of Rights.
Do you believe there should be a quota?
But governments need to put in policies, governments need to put in processes so that the Constitution can be translated into policies and plans, and that will be able to deliver what the constitutional intention is, what the motivation of the constitutional provision is. So that is the point I'm trying to make.
Professor, do you believe there should be a quota?
No,
for the military?
I'm not talking about a quota. I'm simply saying that when you have a provision in the Constitution, you need to translate that provision into laws, into plans, into policies, into incentives to achieve the objective that is stated in the Constitution. Now, you can put it in the Constitution and you don't do anything, and you turn a blind eye.
Well, you have to carry on.
So Delpa is saying exactly...
No, I'm not talking about overnight as well. What I'm saying is, I was answering your question about equal citizenry, and that is what I was saying, that you know, you need to put in a process and plan.
You know, the issue of government scholarships.
Yeah.
So Delpa has raised the same issue.
Yeah.
They are concerned about the the imbalance in the number of scholarship being given. That the Itoke, rank very low in the award of scholarships. And I think they're clamoring for a quota.
Yeah.
I mean, you can use the same argument in the military and in the other institutions.
Good point, Nemani.
Yeah.
What I don't agree with a quota. What we are saying, that we will maintain the Topazi scheme. What we have suggested, though, is that students who get marks between 250 to 300 who miss out on a scholarship must be put through a means-tested scholarship provision. Because let me tell you, if a student from Bua College, and I met this...
Professor Prasad, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut in for time. We're going to make your point very fast.
I'll make that point very quickly. So what we are saying is we will have a means-tested scholarship for students between 250 to 300 marks. That will take care of poor students, whether they are Itoke students, whether they are Indo-Fijian students, for scholarships to be granted. And I tell you, I met this student in Korakandi, Bua, 290 marks from Bua College, couldn't get a scholarship, forced to take loan. So we are going to change that.
Thank you very much. On that note, we'll take another short break right here on For the Record. Welcome back to For the Record. We continue our very interesting discussion with the leader of the National Federation Party, Professor Biman Prasad. Now, Professor, I'm going to ask you, there's been a lot of talk of the economy. You have been talking of this, a review of your speeches, and all that you've been saying that the Fiji economy, contracted in 2007 after the coup, was affected by a rise in commodity prices after that, and the global financial crisis in 2009. But the Fijian economy has done some growth in the last 4 consecutive years. You'd have to agree, right?
Thank you, Pideli. Now we're getting into the real issue. Issues that matter most to the people of this country. The fact of the matter is that over the last 7.5 years, the average growth, the average economic growth has just been 1.7%. Now, with an average economic growth of 1.7%, you can imagine the hardships, the level of unemployment, and all the rest of the ills that go with it would come. I acknowledge that there's been improvement in the economic growth over the last 3 years. But that has mainly come from almost $1 billion injection in infrastructure projects in 2013 and 2014. And government's own forecast of growth from in 2015 is 2.4%. They're projecting a lower growth in 2015 than what they are projecting 3.6% in 2014, because they know that this infrastructure-driven projects or growth is not going to last. And so they've revised the growth rate down to 2.4%. But let me also just say, if you look at the real sectors, real sectors in the economy, real sector has declined between 2006 and 2011, agriculture, forestry and fisheries by 7%, manufacturing by 6%, construction by 12%, wholesale retail by 9%, public sector 8%, other services by 40%. So when you don't have real sector growth, when you have a growth fueled by infrastructure development from borrowed money, you're going to see a stop to that. And it's not sustainable. And because of that average 1.7% growth in the last 7.5 years, the real incomes of the people of this country has declined by about 30%. On top of that, you've had a rising cost of living. Food prices went, these are not my figures, these are Bureau of Statistics figures, went up by about 60%. Transport cost went up by over 50%. Lighting and heating, which includes gas, electricity, went up by over 60%. And I tell you why this has happened. Okay, we can accept that there are some international forces, international prices, but three deliberate policies. First, when the government came into power after the coup, they devalued the dollar by 20%. So every import becomes more expensive. The second, this government had promised to reduce the bet from 12.5% to 10%. Instead, they increased it to 15%. And the third, they raised duties, and some of them criminally high, you know, on some basic food items. And if you put all that together, and if you look at the level of poverty, it's really, you know, the poor are suffering. And
how do you explain the consumption levels? Consumption levels right now are pretty high.
Yeah,
and we're not just talking about a certain small section of the community. This is
I tell you why.
Across the country.
I tell you why. First of all, you look at the decrease in the income tax for the middle class from 31% to 20%. Company taxes down from 28% to 20%. Huge infrastructure investment, and I said, you know, between 2013 and 14, almost $1 billion being injected into the economy. Some people have got jobs. That's a positive thing. You know, my people in Raketi, Bua, and all the areas, they're all working in the construction of the road. So there is a spur in the growth, and this is why I was saying that the growth is coming. But if you look at what people are purchasing, what is happening to the poor, the low-income earners, then you will see the seriousness of the decline in the economy. And let me just give you, just to make a point, This was a article in the Fiji Times. There was a headline about major issues. Of course, you know, it talks about food prices. But more importantly, let me just give you this. Jobless graduates. As of 30th May, 33,000 people registered at the National Employment Center looking for jobs. But more interesting and depressing, 12,000 graduates without jobs. And more depressing, this student, Karishma from Ba.
Professor, I'm sorry, let me explain. I can't let you go on with that.
No,
we have our own questions. I understand where you're coming from. I want to ask you, if you're going to talk about jobless graduates, what is the NFP going to do about unemployment? Your manifesto says you will bring up the retirement age in the civil service to 60. If you do that, there are more people retained in the civil service. Those jobless graduates don't have anywhere to go.
Don't do the bidding for the government.
I'm sorry, Professor. I'm not doing anyone's bidding.
No, let me explain.
If you're going to go on,
I'm making a very important point.
I understand.
Look, if you want the people of this country,
I can't.
I
want to ask
I'm making a point. I
get your point.
I made a point.
There are 33,000 unemployed. I want to ask a question about those 33,000.
Yeah. But the point is this: that we had an average growth of 1.7%, and that is why the jobless rate in this country is so high.
All right,
that is the point I'm making.
33,000 according to your quoted figures from the Fiji Times.
No, National Employment Center statistics, not Fiji Times.
33,000 unemployed.
National Employment Center, government agencies.
33,000 unemployed. Yeah. If you increase the retirement age for the civil service to 60, as you say in your manifesto, you have more people retained in the civil service for a longer period. Yeah. What happens to the jobless youth, the jobless graduates you were just talking about? The civil service is the largest employer in Fiji.
That is a totally pathetic, incorrect analysis of retirement age. You do not create more employment, you do not create more jobs by reducing the retirement age. What you do to create jobs is to achieve better growth in the economy. Tomorrow, if the average growth of 1.7 remains for the next 5 years, somebody might come quite erroneously and say, let's reduce the age from 55 to 50. Let us get this right. As an economist and someone who understands, you do not create jobs by reducing retirement age. In fact, you worsen the problem. You create more employment. Look at the people who retire at 55. You know, they would be unemployed for the next 5 years. So the real way to create jobs is to achieve economic growth in the economy.
What's your strategy?
Sorry, gentlemen, I'm going to have to interrupt you again. We've run out of time for this segment. We'll be right back. Run for the record right after this short break.
Actually, that's a very illogical.
You're back on For the Record, and we are continuing our discussion with the leader of the National Federation Party. Well, just before we headed to break, we were talking about, well, jobs and employment, and also the employment sector. Before that, Nemani, you had
I just want to raise an issue here.
Sure.
Recently, we ran an article about an investor in the West who had opened up a business, but he was trying to look for workers, and he was shot by 40 workers. He put out advertisements, and he was still not able to fill up the jobs. So sometimes, we ask the question: where are the unemployed? Where are the unemployed? Secondly, the issue I want to make is poverty has been there all this time. I know even before this government came into to power, the poverty has always been there. And so what I'm saying is, as a political party, what are some of the specific steps you will take to address this? Because poverty has always been there over the years. Having said that, I just want to move on to another issue, is about this one man, one vote. This has been it was, the idea was started by the National Federation Party.
Sure.
When it started.
Okay.
Sitiveni Rambuka and Jairam Reddy tried to move towards that direction, but they were rejected by their very own people. The Indo-Fijians rejected it, and the Indo-Fijians rejected it. And it showed in the election that followed. Both Rambuka and Reddy got decimated in the election. They got decimated.
Let me come back to
what makes you think that this time it's going to work?
Let me come back to, let me answer your question on poverty. In the 70s, the poverty rate in Fiji was around 7%. We were better than Mauritius before 87 coup on every indicator: education, employment, poverty. After the 87 coup, and in the last 27 years, Mauritius grew at a rate of more than 5%. Today, every kid has free education from primary school right up to university. No loans, no scholarship, free education. Every citizen has free medical, including heart surgery. So the question about poverty, our poverty rate, the last official poverty rate is 34%. Unofficial estimate today is about 45%. What it shows is that economic growth in this country over the last 27 years, including the last 7 years, has been dismal. And unless you have economic growth, you are going to see an increase in poverty. So poverty has become a real issue, Nemani. It's not a question of poverty is everywhere. Poverty was there before. Poverty was there, but it was very, very low. Second point that you raised about people looking for those wanting jobs.
Jobless, yeah.
There's a mismatch, but there's also in the middle level, people are leaving this country in search of jobs elsewhere. So when a new investor comes in, there are specific skills, and I think that is another problem. We need to look at our training programs. We need to look at whether we are matching the labor demand and the labor supply is matching. And we actually did a study, some time back, which showed that there was quite a bit of mismatch. So some of it is mismatch, some of it is poor economic growth, lack of jobs. Let me come back to the question of one person, one vote. This is not a new proposal. In fact, after the 1970 Constitution, the provision there was for a commission. The Street Commission actually recommended a move away from communal system of voting to having more common roll seats and national seats. In the 1997 Constitution, you're right. I mean, there was reluctance on the part of groups not to move towards it. So I'm not denying that, and our party doesn't deny that. But the fact that the National Federation Party, in making its submission to the High Constitutional Review Commission, reiterated the fact that one person, one vote is what the party always stood for. the negotiations for the 1997 Constitution. I mean, in all negotiations, you give and take. And so, the point is that we have a Constitution, and as I said, I pointed out earlier, provisions of the Constitution that we feel need to be discussed. Of course, there are provisions in the Constitution that we support. So, the point is that we will need the next Parliament. And you see, constitutions evolve. If you look at countries which have been successful, they have been successful because they have taken a process of dialogue and discussion and changing things within the rule of law. No matter what you do, how good the intentions might be, but things forced onto the people do not last.
Are you confident it will work this time?
I'm confident that despite what people might say about the provisions in the Constitution, and this is why I said earlier that we will seek a review of some of those provisions, but we are focused on fighting the election on this Constitution, on the principle of one person, one vote, and I think we will have a result that people will probably like.
We talked about jobs.
Yeah.
It seems it's very close to your heart, and economic growth.
Sure.
That's your specialty.
Yeah.
What is the NFP strategy? What do you propose to do to grow the economy and create jobs? I mean, having a manifesto is all well and good. Talking about growing the economy is one thing, but actually doing it is another.
Our manifesto is about doing things. If you look at the section on the economy, we're talking about trade policy reform. We're talking about labor market reform. We're talking about investment incentive reform. And let me tell you, Edwin, this: if we have a very stable government, a government which goes through the reform, removes all the restrictions and the burden of high cost of doing business, we would be able to create a situation. And let me just give you one other scenario. If there is a government which has a plan, which has a policy, as soon as after the election, the interest from the international partners, the interest from foreign investors, my own estimate is that in the next 4 years, we could see an injection of about $1 billion, coming into the Fijian economy.
Professor Prasad.
And that could spur growth in this economy by more than 5 or 6%.
Right.
And if we do that, over the next 2 or 3 years, I think we would not only solve the backlog of those who are unemployed, but also create enough jobs that those who are entering the labor
Professor
market.
Prasad, you're speaking of creating jobs. We're going to have to just wrap this up very quickly.
Thank you.
Because you talk about creating jobs. But what is NFP going to do? 3 things. Just name 3 things to attract new investment for our country.
First, we will provide consistent economic policies. We will not be we will concentrate on our local domestic investors in the first instance by providing a level playing field, a policy which is consistent, which treats everybody with the same kind of incentives. Second, we will streamline all the restrictions, all the decrees that actually create a perception that the confidence will not be there. And I'll give you an example. There is a publicly listed company in this country which gets its license renewed every 6 months. Now that is a very, very bad signal we are sending to any foreign investor. Before coming, I met a major businessman in this country, and one of the things that he's been saying to me over the years is that the confidence of foreign investors in this country is very, very low. Whether you like it or not, whatever this government is saying, it is low because they are looking at some of the provisions of some of the decrees and the behavior and the treatment of local businesses. I'll give you an example of
Professor, I'm sorry, you're saying confidence is very low. It does not reflect on the ground. If you look around, there are all these projects going on. We have a new cinema complex that's come up. There's going to be another one built in Lambasa. You have apartment complexes coming up. You have all these overseas investors.
Edwin,
a lot of these are.
I can give you more examples. I can give you more examples.
Examples can go back and forth from both sides.
All right, gentlemen.
It doesn't reflect reality.
We're running out of time.
If I can give you even more examples of investment. But if you look at the overall picture, overall economic growth, and I pointed out this to you earlier, that the growth we are seeing in the last 2 years is not because of great foreign investment, great investment by, of course there are one or two good investors who are doing it, but the fact of the matter is that we have had growth which has been spurred by an injection of about $1 billion through borrowing in infrastructure fund. That is where the growth is coming from. So let's not kid ourselves.
Professor,
private sector investment is low.
I'm just going to allow them to speak.
Moody's it's an international organization, you know that.
Yeah.
They're pretty happy with the way the country is going. I mean, that's an independent assessment of what's happening in the country. So we're moving in the right direction. Investment has grown.
I know what Moody's does. When I was professor at USP, they used to come and talk to me, and I used to give them some advice as well. So these are ratings about what is on the paper, what is happening with respect to the domestic economy, what is the indication in the foreign reserve. And so they look at that and they say, okay, but that doesn't change the reality on the ground, that the growth rate has been poor, private sector investment has been poor, the growth has been spurred by a huge public sector investment through borrowing. And we can talk about public debt and borrowing at some point in time later.
Thank you very much, Professor Prasad. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Unfortunately, we've run out of time once again. Thank you again for coming this evening. And that also wraps up our show this evening. Tune in again next week for another interesting discussion right here on For The Record. And remember, for comments and questions, please do send them to fortherecord@fbc.com.fj. On that note, we look forward to seeing you again next week. Good night, Fiji.